For those who are joined already, welcome to part 3 of the webinar series, Maximizing Your Life's Work. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Dan Palmer, and we had some technical difficulties with some blackouts in California going on right now, but all up and running. Dan Palmer is managing partner of one of the top, if not the top, family office comprehensive planning and advisory teams at Northwestern Mutual. Dan has been previously managing director at Morningview Capital, where he specialized in equity and derivative markets, strategies, and high net worth individuals. He began his career in 1993 at Sutro Company, where he served as vice president of institutional equity trading. He's been involved in several charities over the past 2 decades, contributing time and resources to Children's Hospital Los Angeles, the Union Rescue Mission, and the Jewish Federation. An avid golfer, swimmer, and soccer coach. Dan is a wonderful, wonderful guy. I've had the great pleasure of working with him for, gosh, we've done a lot of work together at this point now, but just so glad to have him on board today. So Dan, welcome.
Well, thank you. And Chaz and guys, thanks for pulling this together. You know, today's really about just helping you as business owners get to the goal line, whatever the goal line is for you. And everybody has different ideas of what that goal line is. Some entrepreneurs want to work in perpetuity, build something that is a legacy. Other business owners really want to get to a point where they have financial stability, and which will enable them to live the type of life that they want to live. And you know, our firm really works in a bespoke fashion in that every family has different needs and wants and desires and goals. And so what we do is we manage a family office comprehensive planning and advisory services team that really looks at two really different parts. There's a mathematical part, which is strictly how do we invest your dollars post sale? How do we help you with the sale? What what is a right amount of dollars for you to live in retirement? What are your aspirations? What is, from a philanthropic standpoint, what's important to you? How do you feel about generational wealth and passing dollars on to your children? So our process is really, typically we wear 2 hats. One is mathematical, where we look at your wealth management, your insurance needs, your trust and estate needs, and your taxation. And we put that all into one living, breathing plan. The other side is qualitative. And that's really, how do we make sure you as a business owner can sleep at night? Because my experience and our experience with business owners is you're excellent at what you do and passionate about what you do. But just like, you wouldn't ask a dentist to do back surgery or a back surgeon to fix your teeth. I wouldn't ask myself to go run a company as an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur's skill set isn't necessarily in financial planning, and more importantly, comprehensive planning. So today, Chaz and I and our team, our team has over 100 years of combined experience. My partner is the all-time leading advisor. I say humbly because he deserves the credit at Northwestern Mutual on the insurance side. So how do we take those 4 disparate pieces and really pull them into one plan? In addition, as you're thinking about selling a business, what can we help in terms of what should you be thinking about? So that's really the premise for what we do. And Chaz, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that was a great introduction to the team and what we do. But as we're thinking about, telling the story from a business owner standpoint, and, we're getting ready to exit, let's say that we're at the finish line. We've successfully exited a business. Now what? We have this new assets. Maybe we have an idea of what we want to do. Maybe we don't. But really, what are the next steps that we want to make sure we take care of after the exiting of a business?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to make sure that all the families we work with have a trust and estate plan together, because these assets, first of all, when you sell a business, all of a sudden it's public record. I think privacy is something that is a really important piece to selling a business, because the last thing you want is a wealth manager and everybody else coming after you now that they know that you've had a liquidity event, and all of a sudden you're getting bombarded. So even taking a step back before that, taking a look at how your company is structured prior to a sale. So the sale process for a company really starts much earlier. It's how is the business structured? How is, who is the ownership? If it's just the patriarch or matriarch of a family, what should we be doing thoughtfully to maybe transition ownership prior to a sale to really be very tax effective? And then through that process, going through a series of qualitative and quantitative questions with a potential client who's selling, and really figuring out what matters to them. And that process, we spend a few hours with the family going very deep on both sides of the equation, quantitatively and qualitatively. While it sounds cliche, but that really provides a roadmap, because we find out sort of, what you want to do. And is this your, is this the end of the road for you as far as work, or do you want to have a back nine? Do you want to keep, try another endeavor? Do you, how do you feel about taking care of the kids, and how do you feel about philanthropy? So during the process of selling, one of the things that comes up a lot is, God, I got to get 60 million for my business. That's the number in my head. And actually, it's usually an arbitrary number for an entrepreneur, because in the back of your head as an entrepreneur, you're thinking, well, if I get 60, I'll bank 40. And if I bank 40, I know off passive income, I can make a certain amount, and that'll take care of me and my family. But I think the big thing to get rid of is that arbitrary number that you put in your head when you try and sell a company, because it can actually, be penny smart and pound foolish. You may say, you know what, somebody offered me 52, I passed on it. 3 years later, the company's a dinosaur. So, or on the other hand, you may say 60 million is the number, but that there's big growth involved in the future. But what's the goal? The goal is to make sure that your family's set for life, whether you need net 40 or $38 million, you've won the game at that point. So getting sort of, dropping all the guards around stigmas and set numbers in your head is a good starting point. And then really building an amazing comprehensive plan. And my experience with building a plan is it not just gives you a roadmap, but it gives you a living, breathing document that will change and adjust as things materially change in your life. It's not like we'll go in and have a conversation with you, slide an asset allocation across to you, make sure your trust is set up, and then check in every year. A really good team and a really good leadership and a really good leader of a team is having a fluid conversation with their business owner or their entrepreneur, and really going through the emotional as well as the mathematical or financial piece to this, because it's hard emotionally. Chaz and I both seen firsthand where my brother owns a big ice cream company in California, and Chaz's family owns a company, and the emotional stress is just as much as the financial stress, because you're giving up your baby. The other side, it's basically like being on a diving board in pitch black, at middle of the night on a diving board, not seeing if there's water in there, and we're telling you to jump. Right. And trust us, there's water in the pool. You're going to be okay. So I think that the emotional side is just as important as the quantitative side. And being there as a support system around you, because there's a lot of emotions that go on, is just as important. And I think sometimes wealth managers, accountants, investment bankers, private equity firms overlook the emotional stress that's involved with the process. And I think that a good team around you can provide both the financial support and the emotional support you need.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up that point, and you said a couple things that really resonate. But what I heard were a couple big things that stood out, and that is, we can't be thinking about what we're going to be doing after the sale. We really have to think about it proactively. And something that you've seen, and I would agree with you, and I know our partners at Sunbelt agree with us as well, because we've talked with them about it, is there's a number in a business owner's head around, this is what I need. And oftentimes it's arbitrary, and maybe not exactly do they know what they need. So maybe before even thinking about selling a company, it's asking, like we talked about in previous webinars, what's the company worth? And then what do I need? What is that actual number? Identifying that wealth gap so that we know what do we need to do to get there. Something else you said, Dan, that resonates is the emotional piece. I know that I was in a conversation with a family, and it was a family that had owned a company for quite a long time. And I sat down with the matriarch and the children and facilitated a conversation around what do you want to happen to this piece of family legacy? And basically what ended up happening is the parents said that they didn't have faith in the eldest sibling to take control of the company. And they also didn't have faith in the children to run it together. And those are very emotional conversations, but what it allowed us to do as a team for that family is know, okay, we have closure around the elephant in the room. Now we can talk about how we can pivot our family legacy so that it really is an engine for bringing us together as a family, as opposed to the big conversation we've been avoiding for 20 years. So I think that emotional piece is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Something else you brought up, Dan, was how can we structure the sale, or what are some options that we have in terms of tax efficiency or saving money on tax? Could you share some of your ideas around that?
Absolutely. And just to take a step back, there's one other thing I'd like to mention. One of the most fun things I love to do is when an entrepreneur comes to us who has a business and they go, Dan, I've got this business, team, I've got this business, and it doesn't really matter how much revenue it does, but I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about selling it. So one of the fun things Chaz and I love to do is go through the sale process. So quite often I have an entrepreneur come to us with a good business and he's like, I don't know what to do. So what we often do in those situations is we'll introduce the entrepreneur to a few different merger and acquisition attorneys that we've been working with for a long time. And just keep in mind that there's no remuneration. We're not getting paid on the side. This is all just long-term relationships we've had. But the steps really are, hey, we're going to introduce you to a few M&A attorneys, and then we're going to find the right private equity firm, investment firm, venture firms that sort of match your industry and your chemistry. And then we're going to interview a bunch of them. And then we're going to help you through the sale process. And that's something that is really satisfying. And typically at the end of the day, we've built this great relationship. And when the assets fall into your bank account, they actually never hit your bank account. They usually just come right to Northwestern Mutual, where we have already set up an amazing diversified plan that really gives you, optionality and, really depending on what the family is looking for, passive income. So taking a family through that sale process with them knowing at the end that we've already been very thoughtful about how to plan with those assets is something our families like a lot. So just to diverge a minute, back to your question, Chaz, there are several strategies and tactics that we use along the way and before selling a company. One of my favorite tactics is, if you can get with a family early enough, is to actually give minority stakes in the business to family members. Because if you do give a minority stake to a family member, if they don't have a control in that, if they don't have a control position, the IRS will often allow you to discount the percentage that you actually gave. Also, by taking advantage of the lifetime gift exemption, which I think now is 22.8 million, if you can gift some of those resources prior to the sale to your children, to causes that you care about that are important to you, that's another way to do it. From a philanthropic standpoint, setting up a donor advised fund where you can drop some of your stock into basically a bucket that allows you to deploy those resources over any period of time that you like, rather than in the year that you actually put the money into the bucket. So from a philanthropy standpoint, setting up a donor advised fund is a really great tactic. From getting some of those resources out of your estate immediately. Gifting to children or loved ones or people that are important to you at a discounted valuation is a good one. And then there's a couple different types of trust, which my advanced planner, we go through when we have a deeper conversation. But there are a number of tactics and strategies that you can use prior to a sale that can ultimately lead to a much greater take home of the price that you sold the company for, strictly because taxes are really the biggest alpha that we can trigger during this process. If you can figure out a way to save a lot of money on taxes, it'll definitely overshadow a couple $1 million of squeezing a couple $1 million out of the sale price.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about it from that estate planning perspective, if you sell or give a minority share of the company to kids, and let's say the IRS discounts that by 30%, the future value of those dollars in your estate could represent hundreds, if not millions of dollars in tax burden to your family. So that's a good one. And then you talked a little bit about the management of assets after the sale. I know something that we talk about with business owners is they might see the concentration of wealth in their business as their least risky asset because they control it. And sometimes they're wondering, well, how do we manage assets? I don't want to take too much risk. So how does a business owner go about managing assets after the sale?
Right. Well, I and Chaz,
Oh, Dan, you kind of cut out.
Oh, can you hear me?
What did you say?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Few times, but when I first started my career at Sutro and Company, which is our firm in the early 90s, I wrote Warren Buffett a note and I said, "Dear Mr. Buffett, I'm a huge fan and I'd love to be able to trade with you sometime." And he wrote me back a personal note, and I'll skip the personal part of it, but what I thought really resonated was that he said, "Just remember, Dan, that diversification is protection against ignorance." And the meaning of that really is that while you do have a business that you control and you really understand how, is it a secular growth story? Where's the business going? It is a very concentrated asset where you're not only getting your income from, but you're also eventually going to have your liquidity event from the same place. So your family is dependent on one asset, even though you think as clear as day, you know what's going on, and you probably do. But as we all know in this world, things can come out of left field and really shock us all. So when we're building a portfolio, it really becomes a listening event for us where we really want to find out what matters to you. If you said to us, this is how many dollars we need on a monthly basis after tax to live the rest of our lives, and these are the other important things to you, the way we approach investments is we really want to fill various silos with the resources that have come from the liquidity event. So just moving left to right in my head, sometimes a family will like the idea of an annuity, a deferred annuity, where you say, you know what, Dan and Chaz and team, we want to make sure that just a baseline of all of our bills are covered for the rest of our life. Annuity provides an income floor and guaranteed income for life. That's something that we could have a longer discussion on. The next bucket is a non-qualified portfolio. So these are the after-tax dollars that you invest in the markets. And I know at Northwestern Mutual, we have an open architecture. So we're not beholden to any one fund family or high fee product, a unit investment trust, anything like that. But what my team is mandated with is to come up with a diversified portfolio of mutual funds, ETFs, and stocks that really covers large cap, mid cap, small cap, international emerging, international developed, fixed income, and commodities. And that allows you never to wake up in the morning and turn on CNBC and realize that the company you have a big holding in had a Me Too moment. You'll never have to watch CNBC again if you like it. That's the idea, because the day you retire, the day you sell this company, we want you never to worry about money again. And I can tell you through COVID, I've worked through 87, 93, 99, 2008. My family's been involved in this for over 100 years in California, so I've seen it firsthand. The families that diversify really wind up winning the game. So you have the annuity potential, you have the non-qualified assets, you probably are funding your retirement accounts, which are not going to really move the needle significantly because there's only so much you can put into them and you can only turn them on at 59 and a half. And then real estate, I know being, our practice is worldwide. We have clients in Hong Kong and London, but most of our clients are across the United States. Real estate is always a part of the portfolio. And there is a dream. A lot of people have the dream like that, hey, we're going to buy some multifamily units and we're just going to collect passive income for the rest of our lives. Well, that whole notion of just stacking up income property and being able to set your sail in Hawaii and never turn back is kind of a misnomer, because you even saw in COVID, it sort of was, it was stress test and it failed a little bit because, there was rent forgiveness, mortgage forgiveness. So I love real estate. I love income property. I'm a big believer. I'm an investor. But again, this is just one bucket. So you have the possibly an annuity, the non-qualified assets, the retirement accounts, you've got real estate, and then you've got, at Northwestern Mutual, we're known as an insurance company, but the way we structure insurance is really quite unique. We use life insurance as a third baseman. And when I say that, it's because, we break everything down to the accumulation phase and the distribution phase of your life. And during the accumulation phase, you're filling those various buckets that I'm just referring to. And we use life insurance twofold. One is a death benefit. So God forbid something happens to the patriarch or matriarch of the family. The family's going to have a big death benefit and probably shore up a lot of the tax consequences that they'll be faced with. The other way we use it is an ultimate tax weapon, as an accumulation vehicle. So as part of those silos, I call this, again, our third baseman, because we use insurance to basically for several reasons. And I don't want to harp on insurance, but having come from the other side of the tracks, wealth management, I'm fascinated by the fact that most wealth managers don't understand insurance and most insurance advisors don't understand wealth management. But we actually merge those two in comprehensively. And so for the insurance purposes, our guy, a lot of our clients put in, we have clients put in $1 million, $2 million a year into these policies. And really, there's really no limits to how much you can put in. All of the growth is tax-free. There's a number of investment options. The money's liquid to you. And then when you do go to retire, we use them as a personal pension where you use the cash value to supplement your retirement income. But I'm not going to go down that channel too much more. This is about you guys. But those are the buckets we want to establish during the accumulation phase. Because when it comes time for the distribution phase, you've now just sold your company. We want optionality on how to fund your retirement. So we're not just focused on the accumulation, we're also focused on the distribution phase of your life. And there's a very pragmatic approach about how to fund the distribution phase of your life. We don't just arbitrarily every year say, you know what, Chaz, you're going to need $400,000 this year in today's dollars to live your life. Well, you know what, Dan, I'm going to turn on this IRA this month. And this month I've got some money coming in over here. And I've made some money on Bitcoin, whatever the case may be. I lost some money on Bitcoin. In any event, we want to have a conversation every year in December for the following year with the families we work with about, okay, how are we going to fund that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $200,000 spend for next year? And we'll look where our equities are. We'll look at where your fixed income is. We'll look at where your real estate positive cash flow, your passive cash flow is. We'll look at how much cash value you have. And then we'll make a pragmatic decision about how to fund the following year. That's the work we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and you touched on something too that I wanted to make sure that we cover. I know that Chris Snyder and I touched on this in the first webinar, and that is there's a huge percentage of business owners who exit their business not by choice. And what happens is many business owners end up exiting in an unideal fashion due to, death, disability, disagreement, divorce, etc. And something that you touched on I thought was important was, if we can approach this process proactively and put together the plan, that means that we're ready at all times to exit. So what are some examples of things that a business owner is going to want to tackle right away to make sure that, no matter when they exit the company, that they're going to be okay?
Yeah. Well, that gets back to actually creating a comprehensive plan, sitting with you and your spouse and maybe even your kids
Yeah.
And really going through the process of, okay, this is where we are today. This is where we want to be. But if something happens, we have a plan in place. So that's why, the idea of just a wealth manager, or the idea of just having somebody sort of in a silo is not as effective as looking at everything holistically. So Chaz, to your point, we really make sure that the families we work with are in great shape because we start with a plan.
Right.
We start with a plan, and the plan evolves over time. And by the way, these plans don't just flip on a switch and everything's in place. They take years to roll out. It takes time. In fact, I was on the phone with I was having a conversation with a client today, a private equity client. And he said to me, Dan, we've been working together 4 years. I'm getting there. I said, yeah, we've got some work to do, but you're getting there. So, God forbid somebody has an unplanned event and has to sell the business. By having a plan in place, it reduces the stress and the chaos when ultimately you have to make a decision. Because look, we thought through this already. We have an emergency plan. We have a fire escape, if you will.
Right.
And that's why being proactive is really important. I would start with a will and a trust. I would then make sure that, you have a plan. If you have children, that there's an education plan in place through 529s, and that you're actually tracking to make sure the kids are taken care of. But God forbid an entrepreneur sells his business. The other is a buy-sell agreement. If there is a partner involved, we want to make sure that, you wake up one morning and your partner, something happens to your partner, and you've got a company worth $5 million or $50 million, what's the next step for the company? Well, if a buy-sell is in place with an insurance policy, the deceased family is going to get a check, and that the person and the partner still remaining just gets to go on business as usual. Of course, it's not that simple, and there's a lot of baggage with that. But I would definitely say a buy-sell is a great place to start. If it's a sole ownership business, I would say a key man policy is really, because if that person goes, all of a sudden insurance comes into play. I think that's the part that insurance comes into play. And then protecting the asset, like if you've got a company worth $100 million, you're going to have a big tax problem. At some point, you're going to have a big tax problem. So actually putting some of those assets into a trust, into a generation skipping trust or an ILET, there's things that we can do to mitigate sort of the surprise event. So we're trying to look at what would be an event, a passing, a COVID moment where a retailer, my brother owns an ice cream company, and obviously brick and mortar got hit pretty hard, but, he had to lay off 130 people, but he had a backup plan. And, that and PPP helps. So just being thoughtful and looking out a couple miles than a couple feet is a real big thing. And that's sort of a discussion that's very personal to each family. So on the high level, buy-sell agreement, key man, a comprehensive plan that will basically weather the storm of all of this uncertainty.
Yeah. Again, there's a couple things that you said that really stuck out to me. One is just planning for contingencies and having a team in place that is going to touch on each piece to make sure that, a good plan, I think, as I often like to say, a good plan is going to turn an emergency or a catastrophe into an inconvenience. And I think you were touching on that with making sure that we're taking care of each step of the way. And another thing that you said is these plans take time. I mean, I think we can agree anything worth doing or anything good takes time and effort. And it's the same way from an exit planning perspective in terms of strategies to add value to the business. Chris Snyder and I were talking about in the first webinar, identifying the value gap, the wealth gap, the profit gap, personally and in the business, and then attacking the three legs of the stool to increase the value of a company. And these plans, similarly, they take time, and it requires a team to attack each point of it. But I think another thing is KG and Chris Jones were talking about last time, risk mitigation. And they had that graph around the amount of risk associated with an investment from a buyer's standpoint is going to decrease the multiple that you will get for your business. And you mentioned a couple of key risk mitigation factors: buy-sell agreements, key man insurance. Are those things difficult to put in place? What are some of the other risk mitigation factors that might be easy to get going?
Yeah, so no, they're really not different. They're not that difficult to get in place. It's just about doing it, right? And it's having somebody on your shoulder. It's about having somebody on your shoulder nudging you along, making sure that you do it. Because a big part of what we do is making sure that the ball is moving forward at all times. People get busy. Entrepreneurs are so busy with with personnel issues and acquisitions and product and inventory and distribution and awareness and IP, that our job sometimes is just to be on their shoulder, just to be looking over their shoulder and make sure they do it. So it's not that they're difficult to do. It's A, having the knowledge of what to do, and having somebody gently, politely push you along to make sure you do them. Because we all know we get notices to pay a bill, and you sometimes, I have a month to do that. Or, we see it all the time, and it happens to everybody, and it just gets deeper and deeper in the stack. So, a big thing for us is to make sure that we're constantly in contact with our clients as much as they can tolerate. The other thing is, we look at from a risk mitigation standpoint, what are some of the other things we should be thinking about when you do retire and you do sell your business? Like, do you have long-term care in place? Do you have, do you have succession planning in place? So I can go on, but when we sit down with a family, we have a checklist of these things. One at the start of the checklist prior to selling the business, it's buy-sell agreement is really important.
Yeah.
Right. Succession plan is really important. Mm-hmm. If something happens to you, who's taking over the business? Are they capable of running the business? Mm-hmm. A business valuation is going to get a lot bigger number if the buyer, the acquirer, knows that, God forbid, something happens to you, there's somebody on deck who can seamlessly take over. And so, thinking about that, and even in our business, I think about it as we grow our practice, having people that can, basically take the helm if, God forbid, something happened to myself or Keith, my partner. So the long-winded answer, Chaz, is no. It's not hard to put these things in place. Mm-hmm. You got to have a trust. You got to have a buy-sell agreement, possibly a key man policy, and then from saving alpha standpoint, just making sure we're being really smart about taxes, because that's where the biggest alpha is going to come from. There's always going to be bands between what your company's going to sell for. It could get 50, but it may get 70. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a big swing. But if you're smart about how to, in advance structure your company and even parcel out pieces of it, that's the biggest alpha. That's the biggest alpha. No, it's almost like the guy that spends his whole life, as a stock trader, making money, tons of money. In fact, and he doesn't even pay attention to his ultimate estate tax bill. So he spends 50 years being one of the best stock pickers in the world, makes $100 million, and then he never bought life insurance, and he's going to pay $40 million to the government. So he spent his whole life building a stack without thinking through the repercussions of not doing the other things that you need to do to make sure that this wealth is generational and goes to the people that you care about.
Right. I think that's such a huge piece. I was listening to a colleague of ours who was on a podcast the other day talking about a client of his who had built up this wealth and actually ran a company and spent his and his wife's entire lives building for their family this incredible estate, only to, in hindsight, realize that the greatest beneficiary of their estate would be the IRS. And it's so heartbreaking when things like that happen, and it's really emotional. And when I'm thinking about some of the things that we do and the stories generated from our clients, I think about what resonates with me the most are the people who say, Dan, Chaz, thank you. You have brought me peace of mind. You have allowed our family to live with intention and create a family estate that leaves a legacy that we wanted. But would you be willing to share maybe a personal anecdote from a client of maybe some of the emotional responses that they've had, or maybe the peace of mind that comes about from a process like this?
Sure, absolutely, and that is the greatest compliment we can get.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see on the bottom of somebody's letterhead, the greatest compliment I can ever get is a referral. Now, great referrals, we love them, and there's no better compliment than getting a referral. But the greatest compliment we get, I love personally, is when you've had a review with a client or you've had a long discussion with them and they literally, break down in tears. This happens more often than you think, because people spend so much time building. They never take a step back and think about what really matters to them. Everybody's a victim of this. I am a victim of this because I am a builder. And so, I can remember one recently last year, we had a couple that he was a tech entrepreneur, and the business was doing really well. It was about a $25 million business. He had one partner, his cousin, and they had a profit sharing plan, and they had a big cash balance plan. And years ago, they met this advisor in California. They met this advisor, and he said, "Look, I can get you 15% returns, no questions asked, every year." And every quarter, he would get a statement. They would get a statement every quarter. Wow, again, he did it again. 15%. Call it 4% quarterly. Just under. And when we came in, the team, we looked at everything forensically. So when we do a plan, we look at all your statements, your will and trust. We really go deep. And I can tell you, I've been doing this 30 years now. And if I see something that I haven't seen before, I get suspicious.
Right.
And sure enough, we dug and we looked at this advisor, and we looked at, it was an RIA, registered investment advisor. So it wasn't part of a big firm. And part of the reason I suggest not going with a registered investment advisor, like a small boutique, is because there's a lack of transparency, right? There is oftentimes they're dealing in their own self-interest, and they're selling you structured products, and there's no real checks and balances. It's just that small team working independently of the world. One of the things I love where we work is we have incredible transparency. We've got incredible infrastructure and checks and balances. Anyhow, long story short, we looked through the statements from this guy, and my advanced planner, who Chaz knows, who's brilliant, said, "This is a scam. This is not accurate. This guy's investing this looks like a real Ponzi scheme." Sure enough, 4 months later, we had the guy, the feds came in, raided the guy's office. We were able to recapture 80% of my client's money because we caught it in time, because he was basically taking from Peter to get to Paul. And from there, we just developed a very strong relationship, but it came through the planning process. It came through looking at your resources, looking at where you're currently allocating. And again, last week, he came out to my house, this entrepreneur. We took a bike ride out to the beach. We came back and he goes, "You saved my life." I go, "How?" He goes, "Not just my life, but my marriage." Because when my wife found out that I hadn't done my diligence of where I'm putting my resources, it got really uncomfortable. And so now when we have a full review with the family next week, the wife is involved, he's involved. It's a really great conversation, but we were able to snuff out, if you will, something that was really inappropriate by another advisor, and then build them a plan that all of his hard work would deliver on him retiring at 55 and being able to move to Sedona and ride his bike every day. And that only comes through that real personalized care and taking a deep dive into everything he was doing. But the greatest response was when somebody tells you that, you saved their life and you're not a doctor, that makes you feel pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so. That's incredible. And I think it highlights what can be found, and you're never going to know the value that can be provided and discovered by going through a process like this, and by bringing a team where someone's going to take a look at the business, make sure everything is squared away there on the personal side, family side, on the financial side, just making sure that every piece has a team member that can be helpful. And I think that that's such a great story to highlight. You never know what you're going to find. And, maybe you don't find anything, and that's great. Everything's covered. Or maybe you find something like that, in which case people are so glad that they met with us that they, say, hey, you saved my life.
Yeah. And typically everybody, we're probably on the phone or on the Zoom today, has a wealth manager, has an insurance advisor, has a tax attorney, and has a trust and estate attorney. But the reality is, when you take those 4 disparate pieces and put them into one living, breathing plan, it's almost the sum of the parts are worth so much more than the individual parts. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. And that's a unique value proposition. And really, unless you have $30-40 million and can go to a really great team, you're really never going to get a plan. What we've specialized in is, I am indiscriminate on who we work with. I get asked every day, what's your minimums? Our only qualification is you have to be cool. We have to be able to get along, because it's a long-term partnership. And so my criteria is not how much money you have. It's and it's not coachable, because that's patronizing, is can we work together? Can we have conversations? Can we really get to the heart of things? Or are you always going to be guarded and uncomfortable sharing? That's what we lay the foundation of a long-term partnership with, is just trust and great communication, and really just because life is too short. If we walk into a situation and the entrepreneur is not willing to be open and have those conversations, it's a waste of their time, and it's a waste of our time.
Yeah. Well, I know we have about 15 minutes left, and we do want this to be interactive. So if anyone has questions about any of this, feel free to put it in the chat or to put it in the Q&A box. I put in Dan's email, my email, and my cell into the chat box as well. And then we do have a website that I will be putting in the chat box. We understand that a lot of these topics can be pretty personal, and that a lot of times someone might not want to share a question publicly. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us personally, and we'd be happy to have that conversation. But it doesn't look like there's any questions coming up right now, Dan, but which kind of leaves us time for our last final questions. How does somebody get started in this process?
Mm-hmm. So the process is really pretty easy to get started. Typically we'll schedule, a client, entrepreneur will reach out through either a referral, or in your case, for those of you on the phone, will reach out directly and say, I want to have a conversation. We will have a conversation that is completely private to you and I. Everything that we talk about is just between us and Chaz, my team. I value privacy beyond the normal person, because I come from an institutional trading background where you never reveal who your clients are, and that's what the strength of the relationship is built on. So the process is pretty easy. You would email us or pick up the phone and call. We'd schedule about an hour call where we go through a bunch of qualitative and quantitative questions. And then the team comes back in about 2 weeks, assuming we get statements and what we need from you, and we present a plan. And there's 2 outcomes. One is high five Dan, high five Chaz, love the plan. I can tolerate Dan, but I like Chaz. High five, but I'm good. I've got these pieces, and thanks for the plan. the other way is really, okay, Dan, and Chaz, how do we implement this? And then we really begin the implementation process, which starts, depending on what your needs are, it starts with whatever your top priority is. And then we just roll this out. We sort of check the boxes every year, whether it's, hey, you know what, I'm turning 50, long-term care is something that we better do sooner or later, or I'm going to keep the company for 4 or 5 more years. What can we do from a tax perspective right now while we're thinking about this? Or, I haven't started the sale process. I really, I'm in healthcare. I really would love to meet a few M&A attorneys in the healthcare space. And then we find you, literally the best and the brightest. And then it'd be a personality match of who you decide. And then that process starts, which can be a 24 to 36 month process, depending on the complexity of it. So really, it's really what the client wants. But the process starts with, we have an hour call, sometimes less, sometimes more. There's some 40 minutes, sometimes 3 hours. And then we come back with a plan. We either present, you either say, high five, Dan, great, or we go, how do we implement this? And then we take it from there. So it's pretty easy. It's basically very light lifting. It's an hour of somebody's time, and we don't charge for that. All of the work we do, there's a lot of teams countrywide, between Northwestern and Goldman, all these guys that charge a fee-based plan. I am of the ilk that I want my team to do all the work up front. And if we don't get you as a client, that's just the risk that I took, meaning I invested time and assets and resources. But I don't want you to feel like, I don't want you to have to pay for the work up front. We want to earn the business. So this whole plan is free to you, no charge. And then if we start working together, we charge basically through the wealth management sleeve for all the services combined. And we don't do the taxation and the trust and estate in-house. I quarterback that. So we'll basically get you to a point where you're going to your trust and estate attorney and going to your CPA armed with them to implement for you, as opposed to going there and being in a position where you're like, okay, well, what do we do this year? So basically you won't have to watch the egg timer as he drags on for an hour or two while he knows you're getting billed.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
Well, thanks, Dan, again for your time. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today for your time, especially, not seeing contact info. Okay, let me resend that. Thank you, Nick, for saying something. Here we go. But thanks everyone in the crowd and in the audience for joining and really spending the time with us over these last 3 webinars. We hope that you learned something and will take something home with you to your business partners, to your family, and really that it just open up a dialogue with you, your current trusted advisors. We would be happy to serve that role if you have any questions for us. But again, we just really are glad that you joined us, and we'll be sending up some follow-up emails to the attendees with some more information and ways to reach out. But anyways, thanks everyone again. We'll give you a couple minutes back and enjoy the rest of your week.